Uh, I've done it. All right. Uh, the theme of this discussion today, as a joint venture between the New Orleans and Los Angeles chapters of the Women's National Book Association, is being the book, the significance of inclusive children's literature. And the way that I thought I might moderate this event would be to ask each of you to introduce yourself and how you understand yourself in relation to this question. Since I've been talking for a minute to you, Marty, I might ask you to hold on while I introduce Angela to everybody. Angela, would you mind telling us what you do in relation to this question of inclusive children's literature?
What do? I do many things. Well, I wear many hats. I'm an author myself. So I have picture books. I write children's books for children, children's books for children, and also the parents who have children, and teachers mostly, because I'm a teacher by trade. I run and own Sunday Dinner Publishing, and we are hyper focused on highlighting and spotlighting and amplifying BIPOC authors. And I work in DEI and publishing. So behind the scenes of the indie publishers, I go in and discuss these topics all the time. And so that's my many moving hats and how I'm related to the significance of inclusive children's books.
Thank you.
My
And
author
would
name
you,
is Angela Shante and not Angela Johnson. So I think I wrote it all
I
out.
introduced
Oh,
you as Angela Shante because
okay.
I wasn't sure if you were, handed out, if you were Samuel Clemens behind your Mark Twain for the
Yeah.
rest of us.
Yeah.
But so would you define DEI? That was a term you used. I have a number of my college students watching today, and I don't think they know that term.
DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we have the B and a J portion, which is belonging and justice. And so a part of what I do is I go in and I discuss the importance of DEI, especially around children's publishing, how to strategically make a DEI plan for indie publishers and walk them through some, and I don't like to call it training. We do learning webinars and opportunities to talk about, diversity in publishing. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then you have that kind of like in parentheses, B, belonging, and J, justice.
That's wonderful.
It's usually just me talking shit and making sure people know that we're here to stay. No.
Well, you know what? What was it that Langston Hughes said in his poem about the age of the river? That's, the Negro speaks of rivers. He's saying, my soul grows old like the river. I'm sorry, I'm totally forgetting the exact line, which is a shame because I love that poem. But yes, so why wouldn't your soul be old, Angela? Why wouldn't this be a thing that would have an eternal element to it like the Mississippi does? So thank you for introducing us to your work. Would you, Marty, please tell us a bit about your career in relation to inclusive children's publishing and books?
Okay. So yes, I'm Marty Dumas. I'm a mom, a teacher, and a writer from New Orleans. I taught elementary school for 13 years, and I am the kind of teacher who always really, really, really prided herself on her classroom library. Huge, because even in the schools that have the most resources, kids can't get to the library every day. That's just not a function of a school building. Like, it's not logistically feasible for every child to get to pop in and out of the library whenever they choose. And so then having that space in our classroom was really, really, really super important to me, because part of learning to love to read is finding what you love to read. And so then kids in my space are always free to be like, this book is not for me. 3 pages in, 8 pages in, 2 days in, it doesn't matter to me. And I don't actually want you to involve me in the process. I just want you to get up, go put that one back and find something else. Browse. Are we in math? I don't really care. Just go do the thing. But what happened is that I was in every group of kids that I met, I was trying to figure out the things that they loved, right? Like, so that I could sneak it into the library so that they could find it and feel super accomplished and read forward, right? But I was realizing that for a lot of the Black and Brown kids in my room, New Orleans has a really vibrant Vietnamese community, and same deal for, for the Vietnamese kids in my room. They could not find stories with brown people in it that were not sad. They were all sad. They were all about the struggle. And dude, we need those stories. Like, we definitely need those stories. We do not want people to forget history. We need to remember the things that we're standing on, like all of those things. However, we need more than that. They need additional things. They need to be able to see themselves, be joyful. And no one wants to have a part of their identity be entirely wrapped in pain and struggle. And it pushes people away. And so then my solution at the time was that we wrote stories and we published them in our classroom. And I mean, like, publish, like I taught the kids how to do perfect bindings. Every single one of my kids could do perfect bindings with Elmer's glue, so that we could really put their stories inside of our classroom library. And so that was the way. But it was, in fact, how I started writing, and realized that those kids needed it, but my kids needed it too. Like, by the time mine were coming along, my oldest would literally read anything. They're like me, right? Where it's like, back of an aerosol can, sure. Anne of Green Gables, absolutely. Like whatever it is that's like in front of me, like I'm gonna read the thing. My little one was like a lot pickier, and his decoding skills were absolutely great. His comprehension was great. He just wasn't, I mean, after Fly Guy, there was like nothing out there that he was like even vaguely interested. And I was like, oh, it's because there's not books about kids like you.
Mhm.
Smart, brown, giant afro, loves science, loves school, like absolutely loves to be there. Like once I like, there was not that. And so then I was like, okay, well, I mean, I can write, I'll do it. And so history was born. So then I make it, there's so many people who are writing so many beautiful things. One of the things that I am certain to always do is to write a story where the child is being fully human, right?
Mhm.
They have flaws. There's no
Mhm.
Mary Sue's in my story. They have issues that are going on in their lives, but the issue will never be their race. It won't, not in my stories. And that's not to say that there's not a ton of stories that I love where the child's race is the issue. It won't be in mine. So
Right.
look at that.
So I'm similar in that regard, and I always say like all of my books are about Black joy, like regular kids, Black kids just doing joyful things. I got a cousin book they're just trying to earn a nickname, regular like fun stuff. You know, the girl with the noisy classroom, she's just going through the transitions of classroom, and she's kind of like, I don't know. And it's just regular fun stuff, regular school stuff. Like I'm the same way. So I'm big on Black joyous books. Not to say that we don't need the historical, you know, to
We
narrow
need
it.
it. I'm
We
not,
need it.
please, let's balance people. We're not saying
Right.
get rid of those things.
Correct. Right. But we
Right.
balance it. And so I love that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have observed from many African American women authors writing to older people is that what you refer to as Black joy, Angela, is a kind of ultimate revolt against the death sentence that the Black sorrow has been culturally, the genocide of African American peoples. I learned this in high school at a time when, admittedly, I was not looking at for colored girls who had committed suicide when the rainbow was enough as a colored girl who had considered suicide, but I was a little white girl poet who was looking at poets who all had been like, oh, Emily Dickinson, she shut herself up. Oh, and Sylvia Plath killed herself. And I heard Ntozake Shange interviewed, and she said, I know that a lot of women who can look back and say they are glad when they can see that they have been strong, but they don't celebrate that strength. And I said to myself, okay, I know why I'm not going to commit suicide as a poet. I'm going to do what Ntozake Shange taught me. I want to ask you, I'm an outsider looking in to a lot of the questions that your books pay attention to. Do you believe that Black joy in both your books in different ways is a kind of strength for the journey? Would that be fair to say?
I think that that could totally be true. I also think that it really definitely depends on the context. So I think, and also the viewer, like, which is a part of context, right? So I think that Black joy just is, and it doesn't need an additional thing, like it is. And that should in fact be enough. However, I think that it is undervalued in general, except as currency that can be spent to elevate other people. And so then that joy, I mean, if you look at like the little young people who are like making all these like TikTok dances, and their TikToks are not blowing up, like other people who are copying their TikToks are blowing up. So like their joy is being co-opted and used to like strengthen someone else. So like in that case, in their own video, in their own right, their joy is just their joy. It just is, right? Like it's just them being, but other people are using it as currency. And I think that that happens a lot of places, even in writing. And I'm just like really fortunate. I'm like so lucky, like in my writing journey and in my publishing journey, like I have had some really amazing people like supporting me and rooting me on and like doing all the things. Like I have been supremely helped through this situation. However, there are lots of times where it is because of the primary audience in big publishing, which is largely white people and like white gays, there's a lot of guilt that people feel. And so then I think that a lot of times as, or at least what it seems like from the inside watching, like, you know, like people looking in, it seems like people are looking for pain so that they can feel bad about the pain. And like, those are the stories that often get elevated because there was some core pain. And even if the whole story is not about it, and I won't go listing names because that will be pulling some Black authors down, and I'm not going to do that. Right. But even if the whole story is not about pain, it will begin there. And then it's like they have to sneak the joy in later. It's like you have to have like this like pain beginning to like hook the outsider.
You were saying currency, and I'm like, I often feel like it's that you have to earn it to Black joy, when it's like it shouldn't be something that is you have to go through this to have this. Like we should just be able to have joy.
Yeah,
kids should just be able to have a book just that's about double dutching. Because it's fun,
but
right?
For real, right?
It shouldn't be something that has to be earned, you know, because that's not the case for other people, right? We just take it as a thing that is. So when I say Black joy, it's in a definitely in a defiant, you know, resistant kind of like, this is, you know, this is my actual like resistance. So a song, you know, because I'm doing it purposefully because I do know, and as a teacher, and you know, as a teacher, these stories aren't in our libraries. Those aren't the stories that we have historically seen with people who look like me and who look, you know, look like Marty. So, you know, it's not a part of the journey. I don't like to say, I think it is what it is, and it should just be able to be by itself.
Yeah,
as a standalone.
Yeah. Okay.
Did that even get at the heart of your? Because Anne, you said that, and I was like, I have so many thoughts about this. I don't know. I might take you away from the core of your question. Totally, so did you?
No, I believe you did. What you did not do was sing the third verse of "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which is you know, tears.
Stony the road we trod.
That's right. Cool. Yes, exactly.
I don't even know it.
So. That's fine. I asked you about work, and you answered. So you're in. Perfect. I have another question for you, since Angela, you mentioned specifically how rare it is for a Black child to walk into any room in a public space, see a whole shelf where it's wall Black children in the books, having whatever lives they're having fictionally or non-fictional. Is that important? What does it matter to see someone who might look a little like you, might have a family that looks a little like yours? What's the significance of that? Why does that matter?
I mean, we talk about, you know, as educators, and then as people just who write books, about books being mirrors and windows and sliding doors. And, you know, kids are little humans, like they're going to grow up to be adults eventually. And it's important that those adults are affirmed, or those children are affirmed in their identity. They're affirmed in their religion. They're affirmed in their uniqueness. Whether it's a book that I'm using as a mirror and I'm connecting with the characters because they look like me, or I'm using it as a sliding door because their family structure is the same as mine. Whatever the reason, the importance is to be seen and heard and affirmed, and feel like your existence and your identity is important, especially in those formative years where they're grappling with, who am I? You know, like carving out identities for themselves or deciding who they want to be as they grow into adulthood, books can really help shepherd them into that. It can give them different viewpoints from what they've learned or what the families that they've grown up in. It can give them access to a world that they didn't know. I grew up in the Bronx. I wasn't until I was maybe a teenager before I even left the Bronx, right? And New York City is so culturally, and I had never ventured beyond, and so there are tons of kids that live that reality that don't have access to travel, that don't have access to being able to see different worlds, and they can do that with books. So I think the importance is, yes, it's an educational thing, but it's also a reflective thing that helps them kind of see themselves in the greater world.
Yeah. So I like agree with literally every word you said. And I want to add more.
It's the
if you
teacher
don't
in us.
mind. I know, right? We're like simpatico, never met you, but look at us. Okay. So two things. One is that no, we're gonna make it three. So one of the things that RBG used to say, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to say, is when they were like, how many women do you want on the Supreme Court? And she was like, 9. It'll be enough at 9.
That
Like
part.
we had enough years where where it was 9 men. So I mean, why not? It'll be enough at 9. Okay. So like, let's hold that principle in our hearts for a second and like think about the next piece, which is you originally asked what is it important for kids to be able to walk into a room and see like a wall that's like just absolutely full. Absolutely, yes. It absolutely is. No one wants to feel invisible or unimportant, right? My favorite movie to this day, I'm 45, is Annie, the Eileen Quinn version of Annie, right? I cried, 5-year-old me cried in the movie theater when I saw it. It was like the most beautiful experience I had ever had to date. I still love the movie. We went to see the Annie reboot, right? And gorgeous, I mean, just like the whole thing gorgeous. And I'm like excited to be able to see this because I love this movie, right? But I do not expect to love it as much as I love the one with Eileen, because I mean, that's my movie. And true story, I don't love it as much as that. However, in the opening credits, when they're still just showing the characters in, I did not know this was going to happen to me. I started crying when I saw her in that role. Just like full on, not like single tear. We're just like crying. I did not know that my heart needed that. And I was a grown adult person. Okay. All right. So there's that. Same thing when I saw the preview for Wakanda Forever. Dude, I hope they do not mess that movie up. But literally, I'm just sitting there. It's a movie preview. And I'm just like crying.
Yeah.
I've never seen so much strength and beauty that looks like me in one space before. It's like amazing, right? Okay. So there's that bit. All right. So then the third part, and here's a part that I think that people miss. The white kids need this too.
That part.
So if you are in a space where you don't have any friends of color because your community is not diverse, you more than anyone need these books, because everyone else can meet other people and like make connections with other humans. But like you who are being isolated need this so that you can see other humans. And then that makes it even more important that those books are written by actual people of color, so that the window you're looking through is not smashed and cracked and giving a super distorted view. Because everyone is sometimes the hero, everyone is sometimes the antagonist, and everyone is sometimes a quiet side character. And I think that it gives a false impression when you always see yourself, or 98% of the time, see yourself as the main role. I think it makes weird narcissistic tendencies, and
Totally.
I don't think it's cool. So I think everybody needs it. We'll all be better humans.
Yep.
Well, and speaking of that, is really my next question. Why I was exposed to very limited books like the ones that you read. I found my way to African folk tales and Chinese folk tales and friggin' loved them, but it was all very ethnographically presented to me instead of like, oh, these are my contemporaries. These people come from places that look a little like my places. But I'm reasonably sure I've told my students who are on this this Zoom that I didn't become a serial killer because I read Pippi Longstocking, because otherwise it was a coin toss of whether or not I was going to be like, you know, sucking the blood of the living or something. You know, I think that she kept me sane, and I said, oh, she's original, she's improvisational, she's adventurous. I see myself, but I know that the only Western character that was of color that I read at that age was Jim on that raft looking toward the north.
Interesting.
And while that's gorgeous and poignant, as you pointed out, that is curated by white experience, not Black experience. Jim is largely silent in a way that it would be interesting if someone wrote back from Jim's point of view, the way that Alice Randall wrote The Wind Done Gone back to Gone with the Wind, which by the way, if you haven't read it, ladies and gentlemen, fantastic book. But when I read your book, for instance, last week, Marty, the Wild Seed Witch, I'm going to plug it because I freaking loved it. I realized how much I would have benefited from the conversation you have in that book of owning one's own path, one's own destiny, even though the problems that faced the Black community in Louisiana were not mine. But the problems of searching for one's own destiny were definitely the purview of everybody. And
That is
I
a
have
universal
to,
human experience, right?
Right.
So like that's, you know.
yeah. But I want to ask you, since I'm bringing this up, I clearly think this is important based on what but have you had other people who are not part of the African American community come up to you and speak to you about what has been enriching in the work that you present, either through your press or your work? And for you, Marty, are you receiving this kind of feedback from kids or adults who are not necessarily part of that experience within the African American community firsthand?
So I get, are you asking, do white kids read my books? Like, yes, lots, lots.
I'm
I get
asking you, do you
tons of
ever have
pictures.
white people come up and say, oh my God, I loved your book? Be
All
just
the
like the
time.
character in there.
Absolutely. And boys and like, just, yes, absolutely. Because for kids, until people tell them otherwise, like they don't know. So then they're just, they're like, oh, that looks cool. And they totally read it. And I think the biggest stumbling block for Wild Seed Witch, which I have a copy of it somewhere, I'll find it. But the biggest stumbling block for Wild Seed Witch is that it is on its face very light intentionally, right? Like the little girl, she wants to be a YouTuber, like get her channel off the ground. But the thing is that first of all, I don't know a child today, and I actually still know a fair number of children who does not have YouTube at the near center of their life. So like YouTube sounds very flippant to adult people, but to kids, they're like, oh, YouTube? And then they're already before they hear magic, they hear YouTube and they're like, I will read that one. Yeah. Like, that's good. Okay. So that's the first part. And I've had kids be like, yours is the only one that has YouTube in it. Like there should be more books with YouTube in it. Why aren't there? And I'm like, I'm not in charge of all the books, my love. Like, I wish I were, I'm not. So like, I can give you some of these things. But yeah, no, absolutely. Feeling like an outsider, figuring out how you fit in and when and how it is appropriate to wield the power that you have. That's something that all of us, if we live long enough, have to deal with. And so, yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, I get lots of letters about this book, and I actually try to, like, when I'm sharing pictures of kids with books, I try to like intentionally keep it racially balanced, but I get way more pictures of white kids reading the books than I get pictures of brown kids. I think maybe the brown mamas are just being more protective of their kids with the things, but I don't know. But I do, in fact, get more feedback, but also like still we haven't quite crossed over in terms of like literal numbers of like majority minority yet. So maybe that just might be a numbers game.
I want to say yes, because I know because I'm in classrooms all the time, teaching and reading books and doing classroom visits or whatever, because they're picture books and because they have that universal kind of like, all kids want to belong. Like you said, there are universal story themes that are in my books. And yes, my characters may be Black. And yes, when they're eating, they may be eating empanadas and jerk chicken, but the universal wanting to belong is there. So I'll have teachers that'll reach out to me that are completely white districts that are like, oh my God, we did the nickname, thing. And all the kids came up with nicknames from the Black cousins nickname book, right? Like it's specifically about Black cousin culture, and I'm like, cool. Like, listen, if you relate to it and you can relate to it and you can see that there's so much of a commonality between people, then differences, then, whatever. But yes, I get tons of people, tons of kids, pictures of kids reading and, white kids, Black kids, brown kids, Indian kids, I get it all because a good story is a good story, unless you're being one of the people who are banned in books because they're Black people on the cover. That's a whole nother, thing. Then, kids are a lot more less picky and judgmental. And if they're rocking with the story, they're just going to love it. So yes, I have tons of different people reading my books.
I'm glad to hear that the response isn't segregated, and like you say, the experience of children is spontaneous and more free than a lot of adult experiences. And I just want to say before I give you the next question, the experience you had with Annie on the screen with seeing the Black cast of Annie, I had a similar experience where I went on the first day that the animated film Mulan appeared, and I wept in the front row. I didn't have any kids with me, no excuse to be there as a grown woman. I wept because I thought to myself as I watched this, here I am seeing a young woman, strong, brave, honorable, not just, oh, rescue me, or gee, I hope Prince Charming comes and finds me with the glass, or all of the other indoctrination I received. I wept thinking how different my life might have been if I had seen a variety of choices of how girls might live. But so my next question for you, which is very specifically about the African-American experience of books, is would each of you please recall the first time as a young person, or perhaps whatever the first time was, where you saw a book, where you saw someone who looked like you or whose family was a little like yours and you felt represented? What was the effect of that on you, and about what part of your life was that? I mean, I saw Mulan, I was, more than old enough to drink.
I'll say, so the first time I actually saw a Black kid in a picture book was The Snowy Day. But because I'm a book nerd, I went to research who the author was and realized that, it's not a Black author. So the first time that kind of seeing myself and the craft of it clicked was high school. I was reading tons of Nikki Giovanni. And one, I'm a poet first and foremost. But two, what struck me was that here's this Black woman that's making this super Black like work. And it's intentionally speaking to me. Like she intentionally wrote two Black girls. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is it. To feel like there are people specifically writing to me as a young Black girl, That was all I needed. I started gobbling up all the literature and all of the things that were specifically about Black girls or written by Black girls. And I became more of I was always a reader because I just love reading, but then I became more of a conscious reader after that. And then wanted to be a writer because I was like, listen, so I could be a creative and actually like make this a career. Cool, let me do this. And so that was like all of the stuff started clicking in high school for me.
Mhm. Wow, you had your life together early.
I'm glad
I
you
did
found
not
your
have
way.
my life together that early.
I mean, I don't, it took me, and I didn't pursue writing fiction though until I left the classroom. So I had a couple poems kind of published or whatever, but you know, I was really into it, but I was really into like, but I need to pay these bills. And so when I left the classroom and I had the extra time, I started to like really craft the stories, and then I became a published author. But
Mhm.
you know, I was just like excited about it, but I didn't know how to really turn that into a job. And, you know, people were looking at me like, girl, what are you doing?
Like, have
So
you heard of these bills? Right. So, so yeah. So the first book that I saw The Snowy Day and like didn't look at it twice because I'm from Louisiana and it doesn't snow here. It didn't even. Right. Okay. So then it wasn't for me, right? But I read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and I did not actually personally resonate with it, which is weird because it was like a period piece, and like I liked Anne of Green Gables, and I like read Strawberry Girl like 9 times, and I had read all the Little House on the Prairie series, but I read that whole series, all the Logan family books. I read them multiple times because they reminded me of my grandmother and the stories that my grandmother told about growing up in rural Louisiana, like right on the Mississippi border. And so then I felt like I was getting to know her better by reading those stories. And so then I read them over again. The first time I ever felt personally like I was seeing something of myself reflected on the page was also very late in high school. I'm saying in terms of also race, right? So obviously I could see different parts of my human. I read a lot. Like I saw different parts of my humanity and all kinds of characters all over the place, right? But uh it was Octavia Butler and it was Dawn. And I don't even know how I saw it was like, because you know, it was the Dewey Decimal System. We still had a card catalog. I'm old. So like it was like, you know, like I would not have found it in the card catalog. That's the point. Like I didn't have the internet to be all like Black women authors. Like there was nothing, it was not like that. So then I happened by the spine of this book on the shelf and something just like pulled me there, and I pulled it off, read the back, and I looked at the front, and the cover of the one that I had was racially ambiguous, which they did a lot back in those, you know. But since I had already like we were willing to like take anybody, right? Like we were like Claudia, like in the Babysitters Club series, like we were like the Claudia books, yo, Claudia is our girl, because she was like she was the brown one. So like, I mean, eventually we got Jessie, but that was like, wait, that was an afterthought. Jessie was an afterthought. We had Claudia in the core series. So then I was used to like trying to like, wait a minute, like there's like a little flavor on this cover. Let me see what's on the inside. And read the first chapter and it just blew my mind. I almost forgot to check the book out actually, because I was gonna walk out with it. But yeah, no, it was amazing. And Octavia Butler is still such an inspiration for not just me, for everybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
she should be on everyone's list.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I just have to pull up my Zoom again. My phone started ringing and they just want to tell me I have an appointment, doctor's appointment tomorrow, which is no big deal. So sorry. I'm so glad that you did find your way to Black authors eventually, and it wasn't like the society was making it easy for you to find. But I want to ask you a couple of questions, and I want to invite anyone who's here, if you want to ask a question, type in the Q&A box that you see sort of toward the right. We would love to hear from you. I'm speaking to my students. I have to believe that the things that these women are talking about children's literature, it'd be nice to hear about your experience of children's literature, any questions you have. But I want to give a special shout out to one of our members, Ty Salvant, who's on this Zoom. She has told me, and I'm sorry, Ty, if I'm talking about it in a way that is somehow inaccurate, but as I recall, she is a woman who is like, I want to say, it feels to me like she has like 5,000 children. It's probably less than that. And she is homeschooling them, which is no small
It's
feat.
huge.
And she writes stories for her own children. She's a woman of
Lovely.
color. And I have to believe that part of her experience of homeschooling, writing her own stories for her own children, is partly a very rational distrust of the ambient culture, particularly, but not exclusively, for children of color. And she wrote in the Q&A, she wrote, yes, everyone, especially white people, needs to see Black joy. And Ty is, she is talking about these things. So I'm glad that she sees something in what you're talking about as a common experience. And next time I work out one of these discussions, Ty, you know I'm going to call you. I'm going to need you to come and talk some more, because you're doing important things, and I'm very interested in how you even keep your sanity. It is like one of the best things in the world that I never had kids, quite frankly, because I don't think I would be a serial killer. Pippi Longstocking saved me from that, but I just don't have Ty skills. I'm 100% secure in that knowledge. But I also have a question here. It looks like from Umar Dia, who I think is going to become a new member of our chapter pretty soon. He met you actually at your at the event we had recently.
I know Omar. Before that, he is a native French speaker and like helps to run small groups where for people to be able to practice their French, like their French language skills. So we have met previously. Yes. It was serendipity though that he was at the at that book event. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. And he wrote, the idea of that as African Americans, we need to tell our stories. I'm not sure what the question is, but well, let me ask you the rest of it. Angela, why do you think it's important for Black folks to tell their stories?
I mean, obviously, the importance of documenting the legacy, the history, the culture, obviously, all of those things are important. You know, similar to what Marty said, making sure, you know, it's a learning opportunity for other people too that are outside of our culture to learn. You know, I think every culture should be documenting, every culture should be, but I think specifically for marginalized cultures who haven't had access to being able to tell their stories, it's a lot more important because like Ty is distrustful of schooling, or, you know, because we've been othered in these spaces, in education, even in public education. And so we don't get the full picture. We don't get the indigenous story and narratives. We don't get the Asian American story and their perspective and things. And so because we've been othered and because we've been marginalized and we haven't had access to telling our authentic stories, not a white writer with a Black person on the cover, you know, it's been distorted. And so when you don't own your own story, it's easy for someone to write it for you. It's easy for it to be sensationalized, or I call it trauma porn, or, you know, it's just, it makes it less your story and more someone's perspective of your story or someone's perspective of your history. And so that's why I think it's important owning your story and telling your story and doing it from a very authentic place is important, because we haven't had that in recent years, 20, 30, 40. Yeah. So that's my answer.
So I think that is important for most people to get to tell their own stories. I think that people
Thank you.
forget how important it is for uh, posterity, but also for other people to be able to truly see their point of view. And no one else has that. Like no one else can give you that. And even if we were all writing from the same prompts, like it would all of our pieces would come out differently, right? So then there's that bit. And it's like a part, like a personal devaluation, but I think that it hits double time for people of color because it is so much, no matter how much press you're hearing about book deals for people of color or Indigenous people. If you actually take a minute and look at Publishers Weekly and look at the full list of people who are coming out who have deals announced that week, it's a very small percentage. So then, so you go jump in.
And for somebody who works in DEI and I'm deep in the data, I can tell you that numbers don't lie. It's not, even if you see Black people fully on the list, we're still at 10%. It's 10, so the numbers are not there. These books are not being acquired. Even if we are the face of Publisher Weekly, I can tell you distinctively, it's not. So I'll let you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely there. And I think that people getting to it's not just that, right? Like people from Louisiana should write stories about Louisiana. People from the Bronx should write stories about the Bronx. I never got to grow up in the Bronx. Me reading a story about growing up in the Bronx, written by a kid who grew up in the Bronx, that's amazing. And if 19 people who were kids growing up in the Bronx wrote stories about them, they would all be different and I would read them all because they would each give me a separate little window into a world. We had this year in like rapid succession, 3 Black Girl with Magic books come out. We have The Marvelers, Danielle Clayton. It's amazing. It's like Harry Potter, but like a gajillion times more diverse. Like we were so excited to hear that Lee Jordan had dreads in the background on Harry Potter. This is like flip all that. It's like, it's fully in there, right? So there's that one. There's my book, which is Wild Sea Witch. And then also JL has a book called A Taste of Magic that came out. And 3 Black, like if you put the covers together, right? Like it would be so easy to be like, oh, well, which Black girl magic book? Dude, all the girls are so different. You know why? Because we're all so different. Like the stories are different. They have different vantage points. They have different feels. Like it's like everything. If I were born at this, like if I were 10 at this time, I wouldn't even know that I was supposed to be wigging out. My mom would be wigging out for me. Like, girl, you don't know. All we had was like, you don't know, y'all spoiled for choice, but they're not even spoiled for choice yet, because how many books can you think of where there was a white boy who got to do magic? A lot. You're gonna think a lot.
Sort of the white culture experience, the European Eurocentric views from a variety of perspectives, admittedly, as you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. The numbers don't lie, Angela. We are still talking about a world where white men are the chief storytellers and women are sometimes given the right to tell stories, whatever their ethnicity, and women who are women of color are given less opportunity to do so. Although there is, and I would say, I'm not actually criticizing many of the editors who are working currently in the field and the generation before. When I worked in publishing in New York, I had the opportunity as a little reader for Dell to meet some of the grand dames who would walk around in these gorgeous Jackie O suits with the long pearls. And we were like the most glass ceiling breaking, trying to change the industry from the inside out. Superhero women in so many ways.
That's so
cool. But their powers were limited. They had a literal board of men around a table who would occasionally listen to 1 or 2 things they said. And they didn't always get their way. And it's not that there was no racist in publishing in New York at that time. I'm sure there were, but I think that the majority of this has to do with who is thought to be credible as a witness for our times.
Yeah.
And I
And-
want, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, I agree with what you're saying, but I just want to make clear that like, I'm not personally worked with, and I've worked with a number of people now who don't have their heart in the right place. A ton of like people have their hearts in the right place. I've not come across any blatant racists in publishing at all. Like that's not at all what I mean when I'm thinking about the barrier between people of color and publishing. It is, in fact, the barrier of personal experience. So if you are an editor and you're acquiring, you have to acquire stuff that resonates with you because that's how you know what you believe in. That's how you know what's going to possibly sell. Because if it tickles that little thing in your soul, then it will probably tickle that little thing in a bunch of other people's souls too. So then when the people who are there are homogenous, or it's not homogenous anymore, not fully, but like it's not fully diverse either. So then what resonates with people will more often be things that are white focused or focused on the kinds of things that we were talking about at the beginning.
Totally.
And that's not nobody's doing that on purpose. They're not like being like, you know what, we've got a quota, we're gonna, that's not it. It's a bias that is being held, but also it's in an industry where you largely have to work on your intuition. Like you pay a lot of money for these books up front before you ever possibly even get them to like a preliminary audience to see how people are gonna react to them. So you really do have to work on gut, and gut is going to have a little bias in it. It just is. So there's that.
It's going to have a little bias too when all of the people acquiring are white. And so this is what I do a lot of when I'm going in to work with publishers. And I say, not only do you need to acquire Black books and BIPOC books and Indigenous books and authentic, inclusive books, you also need to hire editors that are the same, that are BIPOC people. And so it is a uphill battle to get our books in the door, because as you said, the preference, the white gaze or the editors or the whoever's acquiring it has their preference, and we can't get past the first hurdle. And then when we do get in the door and we do get in the hurdle, I can just tell you, because I do this work all the time, so I always see the data that the people behind the scenes are not diverse. The acquisition editors are not diverse. The executive team is still not very diverse. The people that are working in publicity and marketing and sales, same. And so, yes, it is a systemic thing. This is an issue that from the top down has to kind of be shaken up, but it becomes exponentially harder when we don't have voices that look like us and represent us at the table. An industry that is completely built on gut can't be completely built on gut, and only that when the people who are making the choices, you can just see, like, again, the numbers don't lie, the data doesn't lie. And so yes, I don't forget what the question is, but I didn't forgot what the question was, but the obstacles are definitely there. And even when, I'm doing a presentation on this, the Publishing So White and Publishing Paid Me, even when we get past the hurdles and we get our books acquired, we're being paid significantly less in advances. We're getting paid significantly less in budgeting and publicity and marketing and outreach, and so there's still all of these things that are tied up in publishing that are of the old guard, and we do things because this is how it's always been done. And herein lies the problem.
But here, what I love so much that you're doing, Angela, is that you have recognized this problem and you've said, I'm not going to wait for them to change their politics because I could hold my breath for a good long time. I'm going to create a press that speaks toward the things that I care about. And when I think about Ty, who, by the way, she said in the Q&A that she only has 6 children. It's not actually 5,000.
Okay.
But
That's a big
I'm pretty
difference.
sure that 6 children that's a lot of children. 6 minutes with 6 children would feel feel like a lot to me in terms of responsibility. But she is writing stories because, again, she talked about authenticity also in the Q&A, that there is something about the way that mothers have since as long as humans have had a language, it would seem that mothers are the ones who tell the stories first to the human race. And the fact that she has said she isn't going to wait for someone to write a really good book, though I'm sure she would be perfectly happy to have there be a really good book in her house. She's not going to hold her breath and wait for the publishing industry to get its act together. She's going to take the reins and make sure that her children receive the wisdom that she would like them to receive, the values that she would like them to receive. And I think that's to me, it's one of it's at the center of why I work with the Women's National Book Association of New Orleans, because our impressions of things as women have largely been discounted by half the world. And I am not going to wait for my lifetime for men to really, really, really like Sylvia Plath or other poets and think that they're not just a parenthetical thing, or to recognize that Ntozake Shange isn't like a side interest, but actually the center of American culture. If you're painting,
canon, get out of here.
yeah, exactly. No, I'm sorry. I am interested in the conversation with the best authors. And that's why I invited y'all on.
Aw, so sweet.
No, it's true. No, are you kidding me? I'm being sincere, because I am so hungry for good writing. And it's that simple. And so hang on, I think someone may have added something. What Umar said is super important, and all you are as authors are doing an amazing job telling our stories to our kids.
Thanks, Omar.
Omar is a dad. He cares about what his kids learn too. He's also a teacher. I am out of questions. Do you have any questions or comments or last words? If you, I will conclude this lovely meeting. I don't know what happened to Baldwin Books, but you know what? They're lost. They can come back another time.
I'll come back another day. It'll be lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Perfect.
having us. This was
Yeah.
Are you
nice.
kidding me? This has been fantastic. And this is the conversation that I think we need to have right now. And I know that Angela is representing the Los Angeles chapter, but I think the most vital conversation that has to happen in the Southern chapters of our organization are ones like these. Someone gave me one last thing, it looks like. Oh, Ty saying, thanks for putting this together, Ann. You're welcome, Ty. I'm sorry I got the number of children wrong. But what I think the important conversation we need to have, because I have a radical idea. And it is very simple, but it is very radical, apparently, because when I was in graduate school, they told me I could study Black authors only sort of as a side issue, because I'm not Black, let's be honest, but also just, it's like, no, the South is filled with genius writers. Some of them are white. Some of them are non-white. This is one literature in one region from multiple points of view, but it's writing about the same ecosystem. And we need to stop putting, making the books about Black folks in the back of the bus, because let me tell you, Mother Rosa, the book has some wisdom for us, and I want us to receive it, all of us, not just the people in the back of the bus
I'm
who already
confused
kind of know.
about the person in the chat asking something.
Oh, okay,
What
got a
is
couple of
offensive
other
that's
people.
been said.
Oh, all right. Anonymous attendee, excuse me. Thanks. That's offensive. Okay. Well, I don't know who you are, anonymous attendee. I have not attempted to be offensive at all. My apology if I offended you, but it is my desire, profound desire, to a full representation of who's a Southern writer. And that would include all the people who live in the South or relate to the South. In my personal view, I meant no offense, anonymous attendee, but
I don't
thank you
think
for
you said
coming.
anything offensive.
Yeah, I was
what-
good. I have a hard stop at this time. I'm sorry, I have to
I
get
have
off,
to
but
run to
Okay.
another call.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure to speak to all of you. All right.
Ignore
So
that person. I think they're a bot.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay.
There, yeah.
it's
You're
fine.
good.
Listen, I love free
Okay.
speech. God bless America. I hope we still have America next week. Go vote, everybody. Thank you so
right.
much.
Bye.
And it's been lovely. Bye-bye.
Bye.